Earlier today, President Obama spoke about climate change during his commencement address at the United States Coast Guard Academy graduation. The president argued climate change and our national security are connected.
So I'm here today to say that climate change constitutes a serious threat to global security, an immediate risk to our national security. And make no mistake, it will impact how our military defends our country.
The president said climate change could play a role in destabilizing parts of the world.
Around the world, climate change increases the risk of instability and conflict. Rising seas are already swallowing low-lying lands from Bangladesh to Pacific Islands, forcing people from their homes. Elsewhere, more intense droughts will exacerbate shortages of water and food, increase competition for resources, and create the potential for mass migrations and new tensions, all of which is why the Pentagon calls climate change a threat multiplier.
Here at home, the president said climate change is already posing a threat to our military.
Climate change poses a threat to the readiness of our forces. Many of our military installations are on the coast, including, of course, our Coast Guard stations. Around Norfolk, high tides and storms increasingly flood parts of our Navy base and an air base. In Alaska, thawing permafrost is damaging military facilities. Out west, deeper droughts and longer wildfires could threaten training areas our troops depend on. So politicians who say they care about military readiness ought to care about this as well.
The Ed Show recently featured in our climate change series the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, which the president was talking about. We heard firsthand how climate change is impacting military readiness.
Naval Station Norfolk is the largest naval base in the world. Sea level rise impacts the ability of the base to carry out its mission. For example, it can interfere with the piers where the ships are tied up, causing electrical outages, communications outages. That interferes with the ability of the ships to do their training and maintenance to be ready for deployment, to be combat ready.
Scientists and military leaders agree climate change is here, and it's already impacting the planet. On the flip side, we have Republicans in Congress straight up denying science.
Global warming is not taking place. It's kind of laughable right now with all of the records that are being sent.
Humans are not responsible for climate change in the way some of these people out there are trying to make us believe for the following reason. I believe the climate is changing because there's never been a moment where the climate is not changing.
My view actually is simple. Debates on this should follow science and should follow data. And many of the alarmists on global warming, they got a problem because the science doesn't back them up. And in particular, satellite data demonstrate for the last 17 years, there's been zero warming, none whatsoever.
When Republicans deny the science of climate change, they are putting national security at risk. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question: does climate change impact the readiness of our United States military? Go to pulse.msnbc.com/ad and cast your vote tonight. We'll bring you the results in the next segment of this program. For more, let me bring in Congressman John Garamendi, who sits on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, good to have you with us tonight. What impact do you think climate change is having at this time on military readiness and national security? And I know that's a rather generic question, but when you narrow it down, what you folks in Congress do is allocate money for future projects, procurement. How do you make these decisions, Congressman, if you're looking at climate change? And then, of course, you've got some deniers in Congress as well. What about all that?
Well, the Congress of the United States is controlled by those who deny climate change. And so for science, for the research necessary to understand what's happening on our planet, they cut the funding. And they refuse, in a bill that passed off the floor of the House, they refuse to allow any discussion and any science and anything about climate change. And so we can carry forward, but we cannot use any of that information in any of the policies by the administrative agencies. This is really foolhardy. The president was at the Coast Guard Academy. The Coast Guard, all of us know that there is a Northwest Passage today. and it's going to be more readily available. Already ships are passing through the Arctic Ocean. We are not able to get there because we have not been able to allocate the money because of sequestration, because of the Republican budget cuts, to build a heavy icebreaker to protect the U.S. Navy in the Arctic Ocean and to protect commercial commerce in the Arctic Ocean. This is serious stuff, and it covers everything. It covers from our food, the growing of crops in the United States, water supplies in the West. We're in a drought. Is this drought related to climate change? Well, we've never had one quite this bad before the climate warmed up, and we do know this: the ground is hotter, the weather is warmer, and whatever rain falls and snow falls, it evaporates or melts more rapidly. We got a problem here, Ed, and the climate deniers are making it really, really tough for this nation to adapt and to change and to modify our policies.
Well, Republicans always want to support the military. Who can fault them for that in many respects? But the bottom line here is, Congressman, you're telling us tonight that there are places on the globe where our military can't go because of environmental changes, because of the lack of funding.
That's absolutely correct. I'll give you another example. You talk about that oil spill in Santa Barbara. Big problem. California has not allowed any more oil drilling in its territory 3 miles out since the 1960s. Yet, in this year's National Defense Authorization Act, there is a specific prohibition against the U.S. military using any alternative fuels. Any green fuels, can't use it, can't contract, cannot even think about using alternative fuels for oil, and that's solar. And I mean, what are these guys doing? It is the most obnoxious, obscene, and foolhardy policy you can imagine, but that's where they're driving the U.S. Congress, and these characters are in control.
Congressman, you saw the report we had just moments ago. How do you view this oil spill? Is this is it bigger than it seems at this hour, and how much of an impact do you think it's going to have?
Well, it certainly has an impact. It has a political impact, to be sure. Again, the climate deniers in Congress have passed legislation out of the House of Representatives to open the East Coast, along the Atlantic, and all of the West Coast to oil drilling. You want to have more spills? I guess they do, because they want to open the West Coast, areas that have been closed to drilling. They want to open it to drilling. In addition to that, we've got a pipeline problem here. We have hundreds of thousands of miles of pipeline in the United States, and the agency that's supposed to regulate and oversee those pipelines underfunded, not given the authority and the resources it needs to make sure the pipelines are safe. So we get spills in Santa Barbara, we get spills on the Yellowstone River, on the Mississippi River, we get bursting pipes, gas pipelines in California with people dying, and now we've got the oil trains running through our communities with highly volatile fuels. Why? Because we are addicted to oil. We need to move off of that. We need to move to these other sources of energy.
Congressman John Garamendi, great to have you with us tonight, sir. Thanks so much. Sits on the House Armed Services Committee from California.